Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Peter-Lovatt, and he's here to share with us his new book, The Dance Cure, The Surprising Science to Being Smarter, Stronger, and Happier. Now, have you ever thought if dance can empower your life? Dancing isn't just a good exercise. Surrendering yourself to that beat can have a far-reaching impact on all areas of your life, and it can help you communicate better, to think more creatively, and to be a powerful catalyst for change. So we have a very inspiring guest today. Dr. Peter-Lovatt is an academic psychologist who specializes in the study of movement and dance. Before training as a psychologist, Peter was a professional dancer, and he trained in dance and musical theater at the Guilford School of Acting before becoming a professional dancer. After taking degrees in psychology, English, neural computation, and experimental cognitive psychology, Peter found himself in the Faculty of English at Cambridge University, where he studied how the brain processes language. While he was at Cambridge, he had the brilliant idea of applying scientific knowledge of the brain and human behavior to his love of dance. He set up the Dance Psychology Lab to study the science of dance and dancers, and is currently teaching dance psychology to dance students and to students of dance teaching at the Royal Ballet School in London. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Peter-Lovatt.
Thank you very much.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this. And my goodness, what a journey you've had.
Well, yes, I have had a journey. Yes, that is the beginning of the book, really. That's where it all comes from. I was a professional dancer, but before that, dance really changed my life. And I dread to think what my life would be now if I hadn't danced as a young man.
So for our listeners that are new to you and your work, why don't you share a little bit about your journey? Because I found it so fascinating that you really have kind of been dancing in two worlds many times.
Well, I've now, for the last 20 years, I've been running a scientific research lab. I'm Dr. Peter-Lovatt. I run the research lab. I do research into Parkinson's disease, looking at how the brain works and how movement impacts the brain. But before I was a scientist, I was a professional dancer. And before I was a professional dancer, I was at school. And I hated school. I hated everything about being at school. And the reason I hated it so much was because I was rubbish. I couldn't read and write very well. And when you're in a school and the ways of teaching you and the ways of testing you are through reading and writing, and when you can't read and write very well, then you feel useless. I felt like an utter failure, and I did fail. I failed all of my written exams at school. And then when I'd failed all of those exams, I became a certified failure. I had certificates in being a failure. I felt dreadful. When I was in a classroom at school, I felt like a dark cloud was over my head, where we were restricted. I felt I couldn't understand what I was reading or trying to learn, and I felt awful. My relationships were poor. I had very, very, very bad behavior and felt dreadful. But I was really lucky that at my school, we had a dance group, and I joined the dance group because I'd always loved dancing. And when I danced, I felt completely different to when I sat behind a desk trying to read and write. When I danced, I felt completely free. My mood was lifted. My relationship with other people was really positive. I felt I had a voice that I could communicate with through my body. So I felt completely different. And then I go back into the classroom at school and I felt rubbish. As I said, we know from the scientific literature that people who have poor reading and writing skills are more likely to engage in antisocial behavior. They have fewer friends and they're less likely to succeed in their environment at school. And none of that is surprising. I was very lucky that when I left school without any qualifications, I got a place to study dance and theatre at a drama school. So I went off there and I loved dancing and singing and acting and being on stage. I loved all of that now. And then when I graduated from the Guildford School of Acting, I then got a job in professional theatre And I absolutely loved it. I traveled around the world and felt fantastic being a dancer. It just felt like exactly the right thing to do. And then one day I always had this chip on my shoulder that I felt utterly stupid. I'd never passed any written exams, and I felt useless for that and carried that. Even though I was very successful as a dancer, all the reading and writing parts of my life made me feel really worthless. And one day I was doing a show in London, and it was a professional show, and all the actors arrived on day one, as did the dancers, as did the musicians. And the musicians, when they started, they would have their musical director with them. They were all given a musical score, and they learnt their music during the rehearsal. And then on the opening night of the show, they had a conductor in the orchestra pit, and they would play the notes in front of them, and they would make this beautiful sound. And the actors did something that was slightly harder than that. The actors on day one of the rehearsal were given a script, and they had to learn their script, and eventually they would come off the book. They would learn their lines, and they would then present their lines. Now, if they forgot their lines, there was somebody in prompt corner who would shout out the line for them. But as dancers, we did something that was really, really extraordinary. We came into a rehearsal room, and a choreographer would teach us 2 hours worth of choreography. And we wouldn't write it down. We wouldn't film it. We would just remember it. And there'd be big movements, small movements, lifting movements, some movements in silence, some with music, some with other people, some on your own. And you just had to learn 2 hours worth of content, of movement patterns. Now that I thought was extraordinary. And I thought to myself in this moment at the rehearsal in London, I thought, if I'm capable of learning that, I can't be stupid. I mustn't be an idiot. I can't be a failure if I'm capable of learning that amount of content. Because I thought, if the actors try to do that, learning their lines by only hearing the words and never writing them down or never seeing them written down, or if the musicians had to learn their parts by not seeing any notes written down and just listening to the music and replaying it, they wouldn't be able to do it, but dancers can do it. So this gave me an impetus to think, okay, I'm going to challenge myself now. So when I was in my early 20s, I set about trying to learn to read and write. And at first, that's quite difficult because you're constantly being reinforced by this idea that you're stupid. I used what I knew about dancing and the amazing things that dancing gave me in terms of changes to my thinking, changes to my emotions, change to my relationships. And I applied that to learning to read and write in my early 20s. So I learned to read and write, and that was a challenge. And then once I'd learned to read and write, I did an A level, which was the exams that 18-year-old kids do in the UK. I did an A level in psychology, and I scraped a pass with a grade D, which is, I think, the just about past it. I applied for university and didn't get a place. So the next year I did an A level in English. And with that English A level, I then applied to universities again. And a university in London gave me a place. But I was very lucky because I then failed the A level in English. But it didn't matter because the university in London gave me a chance. They said, well, you've got this A level in psychology. We'll let you come in and study psychology and English. So I did my degree, studied psychology and English as a degree. And then at the end of that, I won a national scholarship to study for a master's degree in neural computation, which is the mathematical modeling of brain functions. And then after that, I got another scholarship to do my PhD in experimental cognitive psychology. And then after that, I then did my postdoctoral work. And by then I was at Cambridge University, and I was in the Faculty of English at Cambridge University. And even though I'd got to the most amazing place in the world, the Faculty of English at Cambridge University, I still carried the scar of failure. Because even while I was there with a PhD, I was too ashamed to tell my peers there that I'd never passed an English A level. I'd never passed an O level, which people do at 16. I'd never passed any written English exams before I went to university. So while I was at Cambridge University, I then decided to start looking at the relationship between movement and the science of movement. And it was then that I decided to set up the Dance Psychology Lab to study dance and dancers from a scientific perspective. And you know what? It was the best thing I ever did.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share that with us. I find your story to be completely remarkable. And I think it's so empowering for young people today who feel like they don't fit anywhere.
Yeah. We have this crazy system, don't we, where you have to excel at school at certain things, and we have a hierarchy. So certainly in the UK, where I'm based, we have a hierarchy of academic subjects. So we have the sciences at the top. Then we have the humanities below that, and then we have the arts below that. And then within the arts, we have music, which is higher up in the arts, and dance, which is at the bottom of the arts. And our education system and our entire system is based on this notion that you should be as high up on this hierarchy as possible. And if you're not successful at the top, then you should work your way down, almost like a consolation prize with like just an occupational thing. Let's just get them to do something, anything. And I find that infuriating because we know that so many people are gifted in so many ways, but they're not introduced to those things to do, or they're not seen as having value for them. So that does break my heart. But we know also that if we can excite people, if we can show somebody, if we can ignite somebody's passion, if we can show them that they can excel at something, anything, then they have a taste for excelling. They have a taste for exploring. And then they can apply that to whatever they want in the future, and they'll be successful in that. So I really think we should be giving people a broad smorgasbord of experiences and allow people to explore themselves and to become really good at the things they love.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much pressure to put on young people to try to decide how, what they're going to do in life, and do you excel here or not there, and just to try to find their place in the world. And a lot of times they're creating their own place like you did.
Yeah, now that was when it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, it's not so great. So I was very lucky that I found dance. I was lucky that my school had a dance group. I was the only boy in the school dance group, so I took quite a bit of abuse for being the only boy in the school dance group. Sometimes you have to follow your own path. We know, of course, that there are some people who don't find their path, and they never find their path. I still have mothers and parents coming to me talking about their children and about how their children haven't found a path. And they may be poor readers and writers, and it has a big negative impact on their lives.
So how does dance come into play then when you're working with young people or just anybody? How do you bring that in?
Well, what we know about dance from the science of dance is that it's fantastic for human beings because it activates 4 areas of the human experience. These 4 areas are, here we go, I'm going to list them now. The first one is social. So we know that when we dance and when we move with other people, significant changes happen to our social relationships. I'll tell you about those in a moment. The second thing that happens is that when we move our body, it changes the way that we think and solve problems. The third thing that happens is that it changes us emotionally. So movement allows us to express emotion, but also the act of movement is a form of communication. We communicate a huge amount through the way we move our body. And that's exciting because other people's brains are picking up on those movement signals. And the fourth thing that happens is that when we move and dance, things happen to us physically. Now, it's not just that our heart rate goes up. It's that things physically change in our brain. Our hormones change and parts of our muscles change as well. So what we do, we know that when we use movement and dance, we can make changes to those 4 areas, the social, the thinking, the emotional, and the physical. And when I'm working with people, whether it's young people, middle-aged people, older people, whether it's couples or individuals or humongous groups, sometimes I work with huge, huge groups of people. The idea is to work out what they want to enhance from those 4 things, the social, the thinking, the emotional, and the physical. And then we use movement to make those enhancements there. Would you like me to tell you something about the science very briefly about each of those 4 areas?
Oh, I would love for you to share that with us.
Okay. Well, we know from the science that when people move their bodies together in synchrony, even if they're not aware that they're moving their bodies in synchrony, with each other. So it hasn't got to be a full dance routine. But when you get people moving together in synchrony, and then you ask them about their relationship with those other people, 4 amazing things happen. First of all, people report liking each other more. They report trusting each other more. They report feeling more psychologically similar in terms of their values and their needs and their desires. And the 4th extraordinary thing is that when people move together in synchrony, they display more pro-social behavior. They show more helpful behavior. Now, this is amazing. So think about how dislocated our society can be at times. But when we do that simple act of making people move together, it enhances those 4 areas. And these research studies have been carried out on people right across the lifespan, even tiny babies. If you take a 7 or 8 month old baby and you bounce it in time, or you bounce it out of time, then by bouncing the baby in time gently, it then shows these more pro-social behavior activities. So not just in babies, but in 5-year-olds, in 10-year-olds, in 15-year-olds, in 20-year-olds, in 45-year-olds, and in 70-year-olds. We see these amazing effects. So we know, for instance, that the social bonding and the relationship that comes from dancing and moving is extraordinarily powerful. The second thing we know is the science looking at thinking is extraordinary too. We know that, you imagine you've been sat at your desk all day long and you've been working, or you've been sat in an armchair all day. You could start to get a bit lethargic, but not just lethargic in your body, but lethargic in your thinking. Your thinking can become a little bit dulled. Now, we're quite used to the idea that if we stand up and go for a walk, it might release some of our creative thinking. But what we found in our laboratory was something really amazing. And that is that different types of movement have different impacts on your thinking and problem solving. So you're sat working. Let's imagine you're doing a maths project, or you're doing your accounts at the end of the year, or you've got your job and you're trying to think of creative ways to sell your products. We know that when people move their bodies, it changes their problem solving. And we know that different types of movement have an impact on different types of problem solving. So really, really briefly, think about 2 types of problem. One problem where there's only one correct answer. It might take you multiple steps in your head to find that answer, but there's only one right answer. So let's imagine you do something like, think about the answer to this. What is, don't shout it out, just think about it. What's 3 plus 2? We know that's 5. What's 5 times 3? We know that's 15. What's 15 times 3? Well, we know that's 45. Well, what's 43 times 9? Okay, so now what you need to do is start working out in your head, without using a pen and paper, what is 43 times 9? And you've got lots of these cognitions going on in your head, helping you to find the answer. You're taking multiple steps to find one correct answer. That's called convergent problem solving. Now, let's think of something a bit more creative. Now, let's take something like, a mobile phone. What could you use a mobile phone for which it was never designed? So what creative use could you find for a mobile phone that was never designed to use that thing for? Now, what you have to do here is to find a new use for it, and then get rid of that from your head, then think of another use for it, and get rid of that from your head, and then find another use for it, and another use, and another use. So this is now much more creative thinking. That's called divergent thinking. What we found in our lab is that when we get people moving in different ways, either by doing very structured movements, learning a dance routine, or very creative movements, using your body in an improvised way and doing things with your body, moving it in a way you've never moved it before, well, those 2 things enhance different types of problems. So the structured movement, learning a set routine, makes you cognitively faster at solving convergent problem-solving puzzles. In other words, you'll find the answer to 43 times 9 faster. Whereas when you move your body freely, it releases all of the pent-up constraints on your thinking and makes you think more creatively. And we found that when people do that, they become much more creative in their thinking. And we applied that in schools, we've applied it in healthcare settings and in businesses. And we know now that we can get people thinking more creatively when they move their body in different ways. So we got that with social and thinking other emotions. We know we communicate our emotions. And what's amazing when we communicate our emotions is that we communicate through our bodies. But we're not very good at that. We tend to hold our emotions in. We hold them in tight. We get locked into our body with our emotions. And it can sometimes be really hard to release those emotions. Where in the world, if you're a 6-year-old, you can dash around and you can wear your emotions on your sleeve. Or if you're a Labrador dog, you can wag your tail with excitement whenever you're feeling great about yourself. But unless you're a 6-year-old or a Labrador, when do we as humans have an opportunity to really express ourselves, to show through our bodies what we're really thinking and feeling? Well, dance is the place we do that. And it's a fantastically cathartic thing to do. And finally, with our brains, the physical element of dance, we know that when people dance together, and this is, I think, extraordinary, when people dance together, it leads to an increase in their pain threshold. So our physical bodies change. Our chemicals in our brain, our opioid reception in our brain start firing more. We release more of that. And we have an increase in our pain threshold as a consequence of dancing. And studies at Oxford University have shown that when you get people moving together, then it leads to these neurochemicals changing. And it changes things like our pain threshold, which is just amazing. We have all this stuff going on inside our body, and all we have to do is move it. And this is why we get some people with chronic pain conditions that when they dance, they feel a lower level of pain. And sometimes when you just take that pain off for a period of time, oh boy, that gives such relief to your thinking and your feelings and the relief that people get for that period of time. And it's entirely natural that they get that through dancing. So that gives you a brief overview of the science of what happens to us when we dance. So when we use that with groups of people or with individuals, with young people or older people, we can use different combinations of those 4 elements, the social, the thinking, and the emotional, and the physical, to help people address their problems. And that's the basis of the dance cure. And that's why we have these dance prescriptions in the dance cure that people can use.
I just love that. I love how that all comes together. Do you ever get anyone that says, well, I can't really dance. I have 2 left feet. I mean, what do you say to those people?
You're absolutely right. Now, yes, I do get people who say that, but I don't believe them. When people say they can't dance, what they really mean is they don't dance or they won't dance. But dance is such a deep-rooted thing. We know that human beings are born to dance. It's not the case that only some human beings are born to dance. We know they all are. When you play music to a tiny, tiny, tiny baby, it'll start wriggling its body in response to that musical rhythmic stimuli, and it'll smile at the same time. Many people who say to me they don't dance are anxious about dancing for a number of reasons. They might think that dancing, you have to be a certain competency level to be allowed to dance. Or you have to be a certain sex or a certain gender or a certain age or a certain ethnicity. People think that dancing belongs to certain people and not other people. A lot of the research we've done on understanding why people don't dance is based on this idea that they feel self-conscious about moving their body. Some people have stopped dancing because they've been really hurt in the process of dancing. There are lots of stories of people who, when they were 8, 9, or 10, used to love to dance, and then somebody laughed at them. Or other situations where somebody asked somebody else to dance and they were rejected. Or their peer group ridiculed dancing because it said something about them that they didn't want to identify with. And so some people have these notions of not being able to dance. Now, there are some wonderful TV shows on TV about dancing, like Dancing with the Stars. But some of the problems with those shows, and when we see amazing ballet dancers dance, is that people think they have to have a certain level of competence to be allowed to dance. So they think, oh, I'm not good enough to be a dancer. Oh, no, I can't get my leg up by my ear anymore, although I used to. Or my body shape is the wrong size. And what I do with all of those ideas, I go back to basics. I say that dancing it's an innate activity that we can all do. And we get rid of the expectation of being good. There's no such thing as a good or a bad dancer, in the way there's no such thing as being a good or a bad breather or walker or eater. These are natural activities that we do. And so we can work with people to find their inner groove. And groove, of course, is a scientific term. We can measure groove. We can get people into that groove. We can help them to feel the rhythm inside of them. And then we can help them to find their dance.
Oh my gosh, that's so inspiring because it seems like sometimes people get a little hung up, like they're afraid, to get out there and just express themselves. And I find this to be so freeing. I mean, I think your book just provides so much inspiration for people to get out there and start dancing.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think there's a section in the book about finding your groove. And there are some exercises to do with, you could just do it entirely by yourself, just laying on your bed by yourself with your eyes closed, listening to some music, something that you like, and just finding a rhythm inside your body somewhere. And it's a rhythm that nobody else can see, but you might twitch and move parts of your body in response to different rhythms. And it's invisible, but you can feel it. And the idea then is to make that slightly larger, so that the response of those rhythms comes out of the body and eventually might come into your hand or your foot or your knee. It comes up, and then you could maybe sit on the edge of the bed, keeping doing it, and bring your shoulders into play, and then eventually stand up, moving by yourself in your own private space. And then eventually maybe look in a mirror and dance with yourself and find that groove and movement, but find a piece of music that you love, that grooviness. And then find somebody you trust and bring them into your space and feel groovy with them. And then build up slowly to then going out and dancing in a place that you think is appropriate for you to dance, if that's what you want to do. But a lot of people say they don't dance because they can't go to a ballroom, or they feel too old to go to a nightclub. Well, we can dance wherever we are, any space at all, regardless of our movement abilities. We can all, if we can twitch one muscle in our body, then we're dancing.
I think we've all seen a couple viral videos go out there where young people have gotten jobs, and afterwards, where they think no one's looking, they get out there and they just dance away, because they're so happy. And I love that we're using these free expressions, to kind of show how we're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural thing, isn't it? We're feeling that joy and it comes out of our body. Oh, it's like letting off a party popper inside of yourself, and your body wakes up and it shows some delight. Now, but wouldn't it be fantastic if we could change our society to the extent, our communities, so that people could express that joy on a natural day-to-day basis, so that it no longer became surprising? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the person delivering the post could express themselves? What if, rather than having coffee shops on every corner, we had places to dance and to groove on every corner? What if there was some groovy music playing and we could strut down the street rather than just walking? And wouldn't that be wonderful? And parks where people could dance together really naturally. So I would love it to be as natural for people to move in public as it is to walk with a coffee in public and drink.
I know you touched on this earlier, but I'd love for you to kind of share with our listeners, how dance can help with self-esteem and confidence.
Yeah, self-esteem is a really big issue. And we know that a lot of people feel a high level of anxiety. And some of the aspects of self-esteem is to do with self-worth. And some people feel worthless. What we know from the scientific literature is that when people who feel like that engage in different activities, in some activities, it can lead to an increase in their self-esteem and their self-worth. And dancing is one of those activities which has been shown in scientific studies to significantly increase a young person's self-esteem and their self-worth. And because it's a natural activity, we can use that as a building block for people. Now, what dancing gives us, it gives us a way of communicating, and it gives us a way of connecting with other people. So sometimes you have people who are really, really shy, and they feel they find it awkward to talk to other people and connect with people. But when we do that non-verbally, then people can find that connection. So it has a great way of building relationships in that way. We know that dancing is great for the way people think. And because we know that thinking and the emotions are tied together. Now, of course, when we look at self-esteem, that is a combination of our thoughts and our emotions. And really what it's driven by is this notion that we think we're worthless and we feel bad because of that. There's that link there. Now, dancing can give us a way of changing the way that we think. And if we can get people changing the way they think about themselves, then they can find value in themselves and they can find self-worth. If they are feeling something in their bodies, if they move their bodies and that leads them to have a positive emotional experience, then they will then start to associate the movement which they own. It's their body movement. It's them. It's the essence of who they are. And if they can tie that together with a positive emotional reaction to that, then of course they become have a much higher self-esteem. Whereas, of course, if we have a normal thing where people think very badly of themselves and they feel worthless, then this becomes this cycle of thinking, I'm worthless, I'm rubbish. And I get evidence of that in my body because my body feels rubbish. So this is what we're trying to do with dance. And we know that we can do that. And if we create the dance for people that is appropriate to their needs, as appropriate to their abilities, and is non-judgmental to a certain extent, then that can be fantastic.
Well, it's easy to see why people call you Dr. Dance. I find you completely inspiring and empowering as far as dance is concerned and how that works in our lives and how to improve our lives. My goodness, Peter, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work and be part of your community?
Well, they can connect on peter-lovatt.com. So PETERLOVA for alpha, TT.com. And there they can join us there. I have a companion course which goes with the Dance Cure. So if people want to read the book and they want to learn more, then they can take a course. It's a 5-hour course learning all about the psychology of movement. And once they join that community, then we have something called the Movement in Practice Academy, and they can connect with me through there and become part of the Dance Cure journey.
Well, how inspiring is that? Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I feel really honored to be a guest on your show.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dance. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Dance Cure, The Surprising Science to Being Smarter, Stronger, and Happier. Again, if you'd like to connect with Dr. Peter Lovatt, you can at peter-lovatt.com for more information. Again, The Dance Cure is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.